Thank you for coming. I'm Amy Murphy. I'm a faculty member at USC, and on behalf of Dean Brett Steele and our entire academic community, I just want to extend a warm welcome. As we're gathered here tonight, USC acknowledges that this event is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnerships and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. USC is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Kizh and Tongva people. We honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I'd like to invite Brett Steele to the microphone to introduce tonight's program.
Everybody, thank you so much for coming in. It's a thrill to be able to welcome Sadie here to the school and to Los Angeles. We have organized an evening that will feature Sadie and her presentation, after which Sadie will invite Sam Lubell to the stage here for a conversation, a question and answer, and a back and forth on the presentation. So let me first introduce Sam briefly and then turn to introducing and welcoming Sadie here to the school. Sam is an author of about 10 books or so on architecture, has worked with Rizzoli, Widen, and other publishers on a series of incredible projects, including the history of modern architecture that's been documented in beautiful books that he has done, and has co-curated or curated exhibitions on many of those projects, including one that I think would be of great interest to this audience, which is, of course, Never Built Los Angeles, done many years ago with the A+D Architecture and Design Museum here in LA, and which includes a very wonderful, hard to find, but still a super valuable resource on all the unbuilt projects of this extraordinary city, which gives you the best counter-future of this city's past one could ever imagine. Sam, thank you for coming in and joining us here. This is the second event of the USC Architecture's Crossing Design Borders, a speaker series presented by the USC School of Architecture with USC Visions and Voices. This annual speaker series was envisioned by Mark Rios. Mark is with us here this evening, originally envisioned by Mark and supported generously by a group of friends to honor Mark's lifetime commitment to creative, inclusive, and community-centered design, all forms of practice and interests of his firm, Rios, a global practice, and a firm here in Los Angeles. So Mark, thank you, and to all the supporters that have made this series possible, which really is intended to serve university-wide for an arts and humanities initiative here at USC that provides a transformative and provocative experience for all USC students, for sure, regardless of their major and interest, and which is meant by design to be about design and the ways in which design can genuinely cross borders, forms of practice, ways of living and working in the world. I am honored this evening to introduce a friend, indeed a former colleague from London days as tonight's distinguished speaker. Sadie Morgan has traveled for this event all the way from London, which does happen to be, for those of you that don't know, still the most traveled long-haul route in the world between London and Los Angeles. My phone told me earlier today there will be 65 flights this week between those two cities. Up to 300 people per flight, roughly, no, bigger than the size of this room. Those two worlds have been connected for many decades, and tonight's lecture is certainly a part of that global connection. Sadie is an acclaimed designer and co-founding director of the London-based firm DRMM, a RIBA Sterling Prize-winning architecture studio that for 30 years or so has built a series of extraordinary and innovative projects as part of their larger practice. And during the last decade especially, Sadie has played a key role at the highest levels of political power in the United Kingdom in the advocacy, as the British might say, advocacy, of exemplary design and architecture for large-scale development, infrastructure, and the built environment. And I can't imagine a more important topic for a city like Los Angeles, in which architectures of all kinds come in forms of infrastructure. So it is a real treat and an honor and a privilege that Sadie can come in and share her experience. Sadie's roles across the entirety of British architecture life are many, and include chairing the design panel for the high-speed 2 HS2 rail line in the UK and the Ebbsfleet Design Forum, for chairing the cross-cutting committee for Homes England, for which she is a board member, and acting as a commissioner for the National Infrastructure Commission in the UK, the NIC, where she has been absolutely instrumental in setting up that group's design group within the NIC, which places design at the absolute heart of massive major infrastructural projects of all kinds. Aside from these and other ongoing advisory roles, Sadie joined the core group of the West Midlands Future Task Force in 2022, and in 2021 she became a member of the Net Zero Buildings Council. In 2017, Sadie became a mayor's design advocate for Greater London Authority and was named New Londoner of the Year by New London Architecture, which she joined originally as a senior advisor. She has also established her own foundation, which I'm sure we'll hear about this evening, the Quality of Life Foundation, as an independent body prioritizing well-being in the built environment. Our paths first crossed as youngish teachers many years ago in London, and crossed again in 2013 when Sadie was elected the youngest ever president of the Architectural Association. I think at that time about 160 years old. And I had an honor of working with her and with our many colleagues, trustees, and members of the school community on a series of projects that included the expanding of the school's Georgian campus, the building of a new campus out in Dorset, which I'm proud to say students and faculty did on their own, and the launch of a worldwide school that took visiting programs to about 50 cities a year across 5 continents and really tried to cross design borders in many ways that resonate with what Sadie will be sharing tonight. Many awards and recognitions along the way. I will cut that list short to simply say that award list includes in 2020 the Queen awarding Sadie an OBE, Officer of the Order of the British Empire, for her work in design advocacy in the built environment. Sadie, it is a pleasure to welcome you here. Everybody, Sadie Morgan.
I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here, not only because I was invited by the wonderful Mark, who everyone says, how long have you known Mark? And I'm like, we've met once. And but that once was enough. And we had an incredible night of discussion. And I'm really thrilled that that has turned out to, in combination with Brett, as he's said, and many of you have been trying to get some dirties on him, I have to say. Tell us about. But I've remained tight-lipped. But I have half a glass of wine here, and we can see how the evening goes on when it gets to the end of it. But I think I'm mainly really thrilled to be here because the Vision and Voices series, the Crossing Borders, just really resonates with the work that I've been doing and also so strongly aligns with my personal beliefs. I've always, as has been said, believed in the power of advocacy, understanding, and embracing unique worldviews. And in particular, I think acting as an amplifier to diverse voices. If I think about my own practice, I think we have 21 nationalities. See, I've only had half a glass of wine. Nationalities, thank you. And 50 within a practice of about 50, 60 people. So we've always, I think, enjoyed a really kind of diverse and interesting, rich mix of people. So the idea of that collaborative thinking, I think, as I said before, brings a richness to our conversations and scrutiny to our thought processes. And it helps, I think, us to embed integrity into everything that we do. And I want to talk to you about integrity, specifically, I think, this evening within the remit of design. And what does it mean to practice design integrity? I suspect it means different things for different people and practitioners, for different contexts and for different times, even though I think some ideas seem to have remained universal. What constitutes good or bad design will always be in some part subjective. In that respect, I think tonight I'd rather focus on what we can do to bring honesty and good intentions to the design process. One thing I have always been taught is to sort of set up and tell you what I'm going to be doing, just so that you can keep me to it. I've divided this talk into 3 sections. The first section will take inspiration from USC's own language, and I will talk about the cross points between visions and voices, the moments of which the vision of a design project aligns with the voices it seeks to uplift or represent. Then in the second, I will investigate the practical way that this happens. And through 5 examples, I hope to demonstrate when the moments of visions and voices align. And finally, in the third section, I'll wrap up, don't be too excited about that just yet, with my summary on what integrity in design means to me and how it might evolve into the future. So the role of design, in my belief, is not the end goal of creating a beautiful product or place, but it's the process of finding alignment between the vision and the myriad of voices that are part of the journey to get there. But what does that look like in practice? The vision of a project rests on pragmatic factors, including the brief, the intention, the climate, and technical decisions. The voices of a project are discovered through place and people, the connection with whom is vital. And the alignment of which creates a shared ambition, stewardship, and a sense of identity and sustainability in the widest of contexts. And why do I strongly adhere to this belief? Because I think of my own upbringing. And I'm going to share, sorry, you always get this. Can you see me in my really cute outfit there on the right? Is it your right hand side? I always can't give up an opportunity to talk a little bit about my upbringing, because I do actually genuinely think it's incredibly important to not only reflect on your own voice, as I've said here, but think about how the way in which the journey of your life has evolved really does impact the work that you do. So my first exposure to what it means to have a vision that included a diverse group of voices came from my own home. As a child, I grew up in an apartment in a commune set up by my grandfather, beginning in the late 1940s. 3 families collected the equivalent cost of 1 home, and with the combined money were able to buy a very large house. They were sold very cheaply after the war. And my grandfather had lost his brother, his 18-year-old brother, in that war, and I think was looking to find a different way of living and a different way of integrating a sort of community of people. So the original agreement was 1 room per person. Oh, I'll just show you that. That is my great-grandmother. She died when she was 111. She was the oldest woman in Great Britain. Guinness Book of Records. And no thanks to my care. But I used to come home at 6 o'clock when I was 6 years old, I used to come home from school every night and look after her. And I think that that level of social interaction and care and understanding the importance of looking after others was so deeply embedded in me that I think it's important to I think, talk about those relationships, because so many young people, I think, don't really respect or understand the next generation in a way that perhaps I had the absolute honour to be able to enjoy. So the original agreement had one room per person. Families would have apartments, but they would move around as they increased or decreased in size. Single residents shared bathrooms and kitchens. A nursery was set up to allow single mothers to work. And after some time, dedicated offices were built so that occupants could work from home. So if any of you have read, or involved in the sort of new communal living, or a lot of books that are now being written, particularly in the UK, I've generally written the foreword to them. And I think there's a lesson here in that all these great new ideas have always happened at some point in history before. And as I said before here, living communally taught me many things, from the value of sharing to the worth of both the older and younger generations, as well as the importance of looking after others. And it, most importantly, I think, for tonight, it taught me the importance of diversity and how that can be harnessed to bring a richness of experience and ultimately, for me, a confidence in the power of one's own voice. So growing up in this way, I think, taught me to challenge the status quo, to push back on reliance of what it meant to be seen as normal or doing things in the same way. It taught me to listen to the various voices and views of those involved in the design process. Concepts like co-design, as I said before, are no longer a novelty, but 25 years ago it was a very, very different story. And now we understand the importance of including those voices and an understanding that in order to manage the big issues of the day, we have to take collective responsibility. And of course, we need the vision. Without the ability to think outside of the box or imagining different solutions to convention or complex problems, we are frankly, I don't know why I wrote this down, stuffed. I don't think it's an English word. Society has long believed that the role of the architect or designer is to make beautiful things. But that's only one very small part, I think, of our role. Design is everything, and everything is design. Our problem-solving skills need to be exhaustive as we navigate the responsibility of designing our built environment, inside or out, and at whatever scale. Issues of societal disparity, economic needs, environmental and fabric implications, health and well-being, the list goes on. But we have to remember a little bit of joy and fun. Alongside sustainable and socially useful is something that has been integral to the work of my practice ever since we started. So Sliding House, I think, is one of our earliest projects, and this, as well as being an extraordinary place to live that works throughout the seasons, is so environmentally sound that it sells its electricity back to the grid. So now to demonstrate some instances where visions and voices aligned, I'm going to look at 5 different projects that I've personally been a part of. The first will be one of my own practice, DRMM's earliest projects for a failing school in southeast London. The second, the studio's RIBA Sterling Prize-winning project for the renovation of Hastings Pier. And for the third example, I'll be talking about the role of design guidance within national development and my focus on promoting design, integration and expertise from early stages of large-scale infrastructure. The fourth, we'll be looking at a very special project that was designed as part of a bigger idea for a group of buildings of care that now exist in several locations. And finally, I will talk about the Quality of Life Foundation, which I set up a few years ago with the intention to bring more focus to how people feel and thrive within the places they live and work. So what was the central vision for Kingsdale, and who were the voices we were looking to respond to on that project? The vision was to transform a failing school, to design a school and redesign a school that would transform its academic performance So it was a kind of experiment in understanding whether or not your education establishment, whether or not the places that you worked and were educated in actually affected your performance. The voices were its staff, its students, and the community of people around the school that were rooting for its success. The parents and the families whose children attended. When we came to the project, the school only had 600 pupils and was one of Southwark's 10 schools under special measures, which meant it was performing really poorly. The school had failed Ofsted inspection in 1998 and was experiencing an inability to attract more able students or, importantly, increase the number of girls. But Kingsdale had a new teacher determined to turn things around, and we were brought on board to make and work with him and the students to think about how and what to change. And we won that competition because we put forward a proposal not to make any significant architectural changes, but to put forward a methodology about how we would consult with the children, with the staff, and with those people who lived in the local environment. And this school, I can't tell you how problematic and miserable it was. They had something called reverse truancy, so children would come in to eat and then leave again because it was in such a place, within such a context of severe deprivation. When we came on board, I'll just go back to that. We were a young practice. What ultimately do you want to do? You want to knock it down and start again. This is an incredible opportunity for us, or it was an incredible opportunity for us to do something, kind of architecturally significant and wonderful. But actually that was exactly the wrong thing to do. One, practically, because building regulations had changed, which meant if you'd knocked the school down, you'd actually have to create something smaller. It's crazy, but that's the rules. So building regulations meant that the classrooms would be smaller and the overall footprint of the building would have to be a lot smaller. But I think more importantly, what message would that send to the kids? What message would it send that you just you knocked their school down and you started again? It wasn't a kind of, there was no sense of working along with those students, with the tutors, to turn this around, to transform this building and this school into something that everybody could be proud of. So what did we do? Well, it was a very kind of at the time, a school that had a kind of what we call a square donut. I know how much you like your donuts. With a very kind of useless building in the centre, which sort of divided the space. So we decided to gut the central corridor. We bought bought the circulation space from the inside to the outside. There was a really, really big problems around children circulating, and that's where pretty much all the bullying was taking place. And so we decided to bring the circulation outside, so that there was kind of passive surveillance. There's nothing worse than having video cameras monitoring your every move. So how could we give some kind of sense of control back to those students and not make them feel like they were being big brothered the whole time? Well, that was to bring out the circulation and do it in a way that was transformative. The building itself couldn't take a hard roof, so we at the time built what was the first changeable ETFE roof in the world. We couldn't believe how exciting it was to have Norman Foster, Richard Rogers, everyone come down and have a look at what was at the time this extraordinary roof in a secondary school in Dulwich. We then decided to by covering up the the interior space, what was a very leaky building, actually started to work to our benefit, because we couldn't afford to heat that interior space. But the building was so completely crap that all the hot air would come out into the open space anyway, so it heated itself in reverse. And then we built this incredible geodesic dome in the middle, which the local community ended up coming and using. People would get married in there. It was absolutely an extraordinary and wonderful place. The first building in the UK to use cross-laminated timber. This building was such a success that over time we were able to, over 31 different phases, and each time we finished something, somebody would find a little bit more money to do something else. And it really was, I think, an extraordinary project, because in August 2013, Kingsdale was identified as the best performing school in the area and one of the most popular state secondary schools in the country. And in 2017, it was judged to be outstanding, which if you know anything about the Ofsted or the way in which our schools in the UK are measured, to move from poorly performing to outstanding is something that is incredible. And that wasn't, I think, necessarily about the architecture. It was because this building and this project was completed with the spirit and the voices of all of those who were involved. And those kids could not believe that this was for them. There was no tagging, there was no graffiti on that geodesic dome, and the way in which students and pupil and staff reacted was to have a completely different and more positive kind of culture, and one of pride, one of inclusivity, and it was an incredibly, I think, wonderful experience for all of us involved. So what were the intersections that we experienced on Kingsdale? We found that through resisting a new build overhaul, we were able to align with the community's inherent desire to retain the memory and the identity of the original school. The way that we met this crossover intention was through innovation in material use and reliance on structural frugality. We also consolidated the circulation space, creating diagonal walkways across the new internal courtyard, improving circulation efficiency and increasing passive surveillance and cutting down on poor behaviours. The next project I want to talk to you about is Hastings Pier. And Hastings Pier, as Brett said, won the Sterling Prize in 2017. I just have to say this, which is one of the most prestigious prizes awarded to architecture projects in the UK. What was remarkable, I have to say, that it wasn't tragically about a building. At the time, it was actually really controversial, because it was said that, you can't award the RIBA Sterling Prize to a building that isn't a building. But hey-ho. But the fact that the award itself, I think, was given to a radically community-driven project and a work of architecture that many people, as I said, many people, i.e. the architectural community, didn't even deem to be architecture. So Hastings Pier was the project that I think best exemplified putting people at the heart of the design process. The project was stalled several times by incidents and parameters beyond our control, budgetary problems, fires. The moment we won the project, the pier burnt down. I don't know quite what, who we'd upset up there, but it wasn't a great few months. But through the 7-year, I'll just say that again, 7-year-long journey that it took to build, we made our conversation with the Hastings community and hearing their voices the most important aspect to the design process. So what do you do when you consult with 10,000 people, all with different views about what the outcome of their pier should be? And we're talking about a kind of, local and very loved piece of infrastructure. Well, what we decided to do, a little bit like Kingsdale, I suppose, was not to facilitate our own architectural desires, but to do and make a pier that would have the ability to facilitate any number of different things. We wanted to, I guess, turn it into a platform that has and was able to support several different uses, a space that would reflect the diversity of Hastings and the very eclectic community that lived there. So we took that as a cue to build a space that gave importance to its strength and structure rather than to make grand architectural statements. And as such, most of the 11.4 million grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund that the project had been bestowed for its regeneration went towards funding below deck repairs and replacing the deck and balustrades. We also worked with Hastings and Bexhill Wood Recycling as part of a local employment initiative to create reclaimed timber deck furniture, giving the community control over the actual production of the pier's new design. And further funding of the 1.2 million facilitated 2 buildings, the existing Victorian Pavilion, which we transformed into an open plan, fully glazed restaurant, and the new visitor centre, as you can see here. I think Hastings Pier, for me, felt like the culmination of a principle DRMM have stuck to throughout its existence, and that's to prioritise environment and people when making places, rather than the personal or vanity-driven architectural desire. And the pier, to me, has an integrity, not just through its reborn structure, but because it is of the people. And it has a spirit. It's really hard to explain, but when you go there, it really has an incredible kind of spirit to it. And I think that comes from a collection of the energy and the passion that all of the community put into that project, the hope and the resilience of the community that, again, I think has huge amount of pride in this project. It speaks to the idea of having a people-first approach to building integrity and a sense of pride in the built environment. And in the end, we weren't working just as architects on the project, but as orchestrators, helping to consult on needs, define a brief, create a vision, and help communities or clients to achieve often, and in this instance, felt like an impossible dream. I'll just tell you a quick story. So we didn't know at the time that we'd won the Sterling Prize. Often if you win, if any of you involved in architecture, you might get a whiff or a hint. But we had absolutely no idea. And at the time, we were invited to go to a very posh black tie dinner. And we said, no, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to go, and if we were going to win, we were going to celebrate with all the community of Hastings, which actually I have to say my beloved PA thought was a great idea. And at first I'm like, you are kidding me. How much is that going to cost? We're going to have a party for the whole of Hastings? Are you crazy? And anyway, she won out, and we ended up having a party on the pier. One of us went to Alex, in fact, went to the posh black tie dinner. And the BBC came and filmed the whole evening. And the reason we were able to have a party is because it was Halloween. And at Halloween, everybody in Hastings dresses up and just takes a bottle and goes round and has a party. So every single person who turned up was dressed in the most outrageous outfits. And I was like torn because I was the allocated person to speak to the BBC if we won. And so I thought, well, I'll put a posh dress on. I'm not going to do the horns, but I will just put some fangs in, just to kind of, get in the mood. And of course, after this moment, you can see, was I quite pleased? I think I was. That's me there going. So I was pulled aside out onto the deck by the very nice BBC man he was saying, you know, how do you feel about it? And I was going, oh, I feel really great, feel really happy. And I'm like, have I drunk that much champagne? And my mother later was like, the one time you're on TV and you wore bloody fangs in your mouth. So anyway, lesson learned for next time. So how did we make the vision of a new seaside pier resonate with the voices of its community? We first thought about what the definition of a contemporary landmark should be. We freed ourselves from preconceptions of history or even expectations from the present. We matched that definition with what was needed from the pier as a public space. The intersection point came from designing flexibility as a priority over spectacle. We also had to contend with changes, with fires, with cuts in budget, and this actually aligned with the community's deep desire, like Kingsdale, to maintain a place that held past memory. Our reuse strategy fed both streams, as did our decision to shore up the structural integrity of the pier. In the end, pragmatic decisions matched with our overriding objective to make a people's pier. Now, I'd like to talk briefly about my work on infrastructure advisory and the large-scale development in the UK, for which I've been incredibly lucky to have had a hand in and advise for the past decade or so. Here, the vision I championed was to integrate design excellence into all scales of infrastructure development from the earliest stages throughout any project's lifespan. The voices to be heard were the design community itself, its thinkers and makers, and the stakeholders which constituted pretty much the whole of the UK's population, or at least that most of the people that these massive projects would impact on a daily basis. Within infrastructure, an industry that has historically prioritised time and programme, understanding what is meant by good design really does remain a challenge. There are still deep-seated preconceptions among clients, planners, and developers around the subject of design, mainly that it's expensive and jeopardises timely and cost-efficient delivery. In 2015, I became a commissioner for the National Infrastructure Commission. The NIC provides impartial advice to government on all the UK's economic infrastructure. We published our first national infrastructure assessment in July 2018, opining on a sector worth an estimated 337 billion at the time. I know math isn't my great subject, but setting out recommendations for all the key sectors of economic infrastructure until 2050. This formed the basis of the government's infrastructure strategy, Fairer, Faster, Greener, which was published in 2020. I'm incredibly proud that during my time on the Commission, the NIC also set up a dedicated design group, which exists to inspire, promote, and champion design excellence in all nationally significant projects. Moreover, in 2018, the Commission established a 16-strong young professionals panel to provide the perspective of infrastructure industry professionals at the early stages of their career. So when I arrived, I was the youngest person who sat on that commission, and I'm not that young. And we are set to, as I said before, opine on the infrastructure needs of the UK until 2050. And as I pointed out to my fellow commissioners, we'd all be dead by then. So maybe we should think about inviting some other voices, some younger voices, some voices that would, I would hope, be alive and be able to see and enjoy those decisions that have been made. So 3 years later, we achieved consensus at government level that design integrity needs to be at the heart of all national infrastructure. Generally speaking, my aim was to move design up the agenda for infrastructure projects and write out a national infrastructure strategy, which translated as government backing for our recommendations that all major national infrastructure projects should have a board-level design champion and be supported by a design panel. And as part of this, we developed design principles for all national infrastructure that very simply prioritize the right things: climate, people, place, and value. And over time, the Commission has worked to audit its progress and practice regular milestone assessments. But the trouble with producing good-looking reports and documentations is that they generally few people look at them, sadly, and they often remain on shelves gathering dust. And so to that end, I was absolutely determined to ensure that my experience of chairing the Independent Design Panel for High Speed 2, the largest infrastructure project the UK has ever undertaken, even now, when it's been curtailed, was embedded in all national infrastructure of national significance, and I hope these few slides will explain why. I think most of you probably undergo design crits and peer reviews will understand that scrutiny and challenge is the best way to improve the final design. But you may be surprised to know that this rarely happens at the higher you move up the client ladder. And when it comes to national government, it remains almost non-existent. But with careful and critical and friendly advice, it is possible to encourage large-scale infrastructure projects to reprioritise, to focus on climate, people, place and value. Here, the station at Birmingham Interchange moved from a heavy, transport-heavy project here on the right to a people-focused design on the left. Materials changed from predominantly glass and steel to a timber structure with net biodiversity gain through the extensive planting as opposed to car parking. By trialling a specimen design concept, we were able to give a visual brief in conjunction with a technically written one, allowing contractors to be in no doubt about the vision and design quality that was expected of them. So this here is the design that went through the parliamentary process. And sadly, I was on record saying, if it's designed like that, I'm going to throw myself off of it. Which I'm always getting myself in hot water. So I'm like, I had to do something about that. But when you get to big infrastructure projects, the technical specifications are just pages and like thousands, I mean like boxes. So how is anybody, particularly big contractors who are looking to make, to be efficient in their design process and maximize their profits, how do we encourage them to design something that is better than that? And one of the things that we concluded and we pushed for was something called a specimen design. I know, really a stupid thing to have called it, but I couldn't think of anything better at the time. So a specimen design is and was commissioned. Knight architects, who are incredible architects who design really amazing bridges, were commissioned to do a design that ran in parallel to show what our expectations were. And they designed this beautiful bridge. Let me just take a look at that. Take a look at that. For the same price and for the same program in time. And we gave that to the contractors and we said, this is what our expectation is. This is the lowest common denominator that we expect from you. And I think when you look at examples like this, which tends to be what you're given, you begin to understand that there are actually huge advantages to be gained by designing things well. Because when you put these types of images in front of local authorities, they're not really likely to give consent because when you're working with projects that are already slightly controversial, you need to ensure that you are embedding your infrastructure projects not just in urban environments. That's kind of easy when you talk about stations. Well, it's not easy, as you can see by the example before, but it becomes much harder when you have to embed your projects into rural contexts. But you can do it, and you can do it in a way that is supportive and integrated into the local environment. If you think about existing cycle paths, if you think about existing routes, and you think hard about how you can make those connections, if you understand that when people are walking under your viaducts or your bridges, you need to ensure that they are beautiful, that the materiality at which point people are interacting with them is so well designed that they don't need to have hideous fences around them keeping people off, all those awful swirly whirly spiky things. Can't think of what they're called now. But you can do it in a way that is sympathetic, but you have to understand the context, the people, and also the value that it brings, not just when we talk about cost, but actually the long-term investments that you can make in the kind of soft infrastructure as well as the hard. In my case, the vision has always been about design integration at all levels and stages of major projects, and the voices to be heard are the design professionals that are often left out of these decisions or brought in at a later date to manicure those that are already made. At this point, the vision is also about making design excellence an auditable, clear target, and this means once again drawing on expert knowledge to create measurable criteria for the building design integrity. The next project is a really special one, and it brings together the vision of Maggie's, the foundation that founded what they call the Architecture of Hope with the cancer community of Oldham, which is a place close to the northern city of Manchester in the UK. And I'm really proud to be sharing this because I was really lucky to be taken around the Ellison Institute yesterday that the Rios team have designed, and it was really resonated with me because many of the things that the team there had tried to do really was very much the basis of the project that we took over when we were invited to do the Maggie's Centres. The philosophy of the Maggie's Centres really brings together many of the points I've been talking through today. It's about starting with people, understanding what's good and what's valuable to them, and then using design to make sure that the value lasts in the long term. It's also about legacy, about carving out an approach and a worldwide view that some may have found radical to begin with, but which has proven to bring about joy and grace to people's lives. When Maggie's approached RMM to design a centre in Oldham, we made sure we knew everything we needed to know about the history and the ethos of the centres. We went beyond peripheral research and made sure that we understood the philosophy behind the architecture of hope. To Maggie's, the architecture of hope is about the places that have been built with the idea of integrity and dignity at their heart. Each of the centres they commission offer free, practical and emotional support for people affected by cancer. The brief from Maggie's was for us to design a safe, welcoming space, an uninstitutional building more akin to a house. Visitors were to feel encouraged and not daunted. The building itself, supported on slender column, floats above a garden framed by pine, birch and tulip poplar trees. On entering, the visitor is met with a space, light and unexpected views down to the garden below, up to the sky and out to the Pennines, which, if any of you have ever been to that part of the world, are the most beautiful mountainous ranges. You are immediately immersed in an inside-out experience. From a central oasis, a tree grows up through the middle of the building, bringing nature inside. And the plan is free-flowing but articulated to give privacy for each of the many overlapping uses and activities that patients undergo throughout the day and as part of their care. Maggie's Oldham is the first permanent building constructed from tulip wood, cross-laminated timber. Timber has proven health benefits, but it's not only the reason it works here. It works because of its straightforward, familiar, and recognizable. It's not complicated, fussy, or unusual. It offers a safe and recognisable yet uplifting space. Maggie's shows that building design integrity into places is also about returning to solutions that work, that are proven and that are simple. Because there is integrity and simplicity at all scales, and there is simplicity in the formula for good design. And it's not, I think, just about responding to people's needs and desires and aspirations that unite us, but it's also about trying to design a place and a space that gives something back to those people who are, I'm afraid, often unlucky enough to be there. The intersections on this project were plentiful and I would say extremely rewarding. It was our mission to interpret Maggie's brief into a design language that we believe spoke most truthfully about hope. And we did this with a desire to serve the families and patients living with cancer who would eventually use the centre as a place for care and respite. Timber became our material response to meeting the vision and the voices of the project. It was a natural, health-improving material, inherently sustainable and beautiful to the touch and be in. We also chose to base our biggest design decisions on simple, universal concepts of joy and humanity. The connection to nature, views and light, and this meant upholding the values of Maggie's founders and staff who believed in the simplicity of human care and who've always rested on beauty as a means to bring people hope. The final example this evening is the Quality of Life Foundation, a charity that I set up with my brother to marry the need for integrating well-being into the development and insight of both the design industry and the public themselves. The aim was to raise people's quality of life by building places that were directly shaped by evidence, feedback, research and commentary. The foundation does this by helping to make well-being central to the way we create and care for our homes and communities. Active, participatory, and people-led research is a big part of how we implement our goal. So going back to the idea of putting people first. So when we first launched the foundation, it was in a kind of context of a conversation that was happening in the UK around beauty. And I have to say, at the time, I was becoming incredibly frustrated that this was the only conversation that we were having. Why I kept thinking, was it that important to whether or not we had a kind of traditional roof or a flat roof on our homes? And why was this the conversation that was kind of polarizing the debate around our housing? And I felt really passionately that actually we needed to better understand what it was about our built environment that really did improve our quality of life and how we could then reflect and impact that on the buildings and the housing developments. So I went and hit up a number of big developers and said that you have a collective responsibility to do something better and to improve the work that you're doing. And one very nice, he wasn't, he sadly died, so I can't speak ill of the dead. But he was most of his life quite a hard-nosed developer, but at the end of his life, I think, realised the importance of encouraging better and more thoughtful design. And he said, "What do you want, Sadie?" And I said, "I need money." And he said, "How much?" And I'm like, okay, as an architect, you're always like, you're right down there. You always think like, oh, just give me a tenner. So I'm thinking, no, don't do what you normally do, Sadie, and undersell yourself. So I'm like, think of a number, and I doubled it. And then I'm like, quadrupled it. And I said the number, and he said, yeah, all right. Damn. Anyway, he gave enough money to start the foundation, and we did a nationwide piece of research, and I mean like the whole of the nation. And we asked people what it was about their built environment and their homes that improved their quality of life. And there is absolutely no kind of surprise in terms of what those things are. I'm going a little bit quicker now, so I'm going to miss a few of the slides out. But sense of control. People don't like to feel that everything is being done to them. They want to have an opportunity to say something about the way that they live and the things that are being done to them. Health, of course, we have to have healthy homes. We can't have homes that are dripping with mold or condensation. We need to have healthy air that we can breathe. We have to have access to nature. It's incredibly important to be able to connect to the natural world. And we have to have freedom of movement, and we have to have a sense of belonging. And I think I resonate mostly to the sense of belonging in community because of how I was brought up, and interestingly it was the one that really stood out. But the other that I touched upon earlier was a sense of fun and wonder. And we have to have that joy in our lives. We have to feel that we are connected to things that that uplift us. And I think that that's something also that we really need to think hard about. So what do we do many different things, but I think one of the most important things is allowing communities to map places in their area that they feel improves their quality of life. And we do that with face-to-face consultation and digital consultation. And then we overlay that information with socio-economic data that allows us to measure over time whether or not design or development that has come, but will come in the future, is improving people's quality of life, not only subjectively, but in terms of being able to actually monitor it, whether or not these things are improving. The other thing that we have done is spent 2 years, when we first came onto the scene, we realized that there was absolutely no standard for community consultation. So everybody says they do it, every developer does it, but they do it on their own terms. And so for 2 years, we worked with the University of Reading and Cambridge to write a piece of research and then to collate and put forward what good community consultation looks like. And as I said before, we now overlay those principles. We work with towns and cities, helping them to map and to encourage communities to get much more involved with the places that they live, and do so in a way that gives them a sense of control and allows them to feel that they have some level of agency over the things that will or not be happening to them. This last chapter is what I'm calling an open summary on the definition of integrity in design. And let's start, I think, in a very basic way by defining what the word integrity means. And one always goes back to the good old Oxford Dictionary. And accordingly, integrity refers to the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. And when I read that, I was like, that is so not you, Sadie. Anyone who knows me might have something to say about that. So I thought, not only does it sound a bit lofty and even pretentious, that I better find another meaning to talk about this evening. Because integrity also refers to the state of being whole or undivided. And I think if we go back to the kind of visions and voices, and we talk about crossing borders, and we think about the importance of being undivided and being a group of professionals and people who I think only if we're not divided, but we work together, have a fighting chance of impacting our built environment in a way that is not just short term, but long term. So how does that relate to the 5 examples we looked at this evening, used as ways of helping, I hope, you to scrutinise your own endeavours? So integrity, I think, as honesty with Kingsdale, was about finding out the truth of what's needed from a place directly from the people that need it. With the Quality of Life Foundation, honesty as integrity related to doing things that you set out to do without compromise or dilution. With a case of advisory on national level, integrity, I think, relates strongly to the being principled and maintaining a grip on your principles even when they sometimes seem to go off script, which with me is quite often, as you might have told. And Maggie's, I think, showed that integrity is about holding on to those principles even when the going gets rough or when you're weakened by factors beyond your control. And finally, the lessons we learned about integrity from Hastings is the strength of unity and the power of listening to each other to understand what it means to put real, long-lasting value into the world. So before thanking everybody for listening, and again for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful series of exchange and knowledge share, I'd like to end with a call for action. My ask is for you all to take some time after this lecture to write down your own definition of what integrity means to you. And I think in that way, and I hope in that way, as you move forward with your careers, your paths and your personal journeys, you will have an anchor to turn to and a reminder of why you do what you do and the difference and hope that you can bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadie. That was wonderful. I think we all agree with that. Very inspiring. And I think as a lot of students here, I think there's a lot of lessons that we can all take away from this. It wasn't just, oh, this is my work, but it's like, these are core principles that I think we can all take away from this. So thank you. And I think I was trying to find commonalities in your work. There's a lot of really fascinating kind of concepts that you have in your work and a lot of kind of very unique and very clear vision that you have in your work, which I think is why it's so wonderful. But another thing that I couldn't help but, it's something that you mentioned right near the end that I think is in all of your work, which is what you said, the word joy, the sense of joy, which is something, well, that in our politics has become a popular word lately, but it's also something that is rarely used in architecture. It's such a serious profession, so many logistics. So I'm curious, how do you, it's not something you can really quantify, and this is interesting because there's so many things here that you're sort of trying to quantify and I think successfully doing in a way that hasn't been thought about. But with joy, what are some kind of secrets you have for injecting that kind of sense of joy into your work, if there are any? I mean, I think it's such an enigmatic thing, but it's clear in all the things that you're doing, and there's a humanity and a joy. And I'm wondering, like, what does it take?
It is a good question, and I think the truth I always find that the outcome of the work of your studio reflects the culture within your studio, and if anyone ever says to me, what's the building you're most proud of, or what's the project you're most proud of, and I always say my practice, because I think that if you are able to encourage a working environment where people are happy, it's really basic. As I get older, it's more and more simple. If you design with joy in your heart, the outcome will be joyful, because you are thinking about how people will be using, your building, or will be thinking about your building. And sure, there are some things that you design that, need to be kind of serious or respectful. But I think you can still bring a sense of fun and wonder into pretty much anything that you do. And interestingly, with the Quality of Life Foundation, sense of fun and wonder is also about culture. It's about having a deep-rooted sense of connection to your past. And if you have that, if you have a kind of relaxed relationship with your building, you can tell I've had a glass of wine. If you're able, I think, to be in a space and feel yourself and be yourself, you automatically, I think, have a kind of ability to enjoy that space in a way. And if you're not afraid to do some fun stuff, with the sliding house, one of the first projects that we, it's completely mad. I mean, what a kind of nuts thing to do. And when we were doing it, we're like, this is completely nuts. And actually, it's just really sensible. It's a really sensible house. It moves and changes according to the seasons and according to the weather. So, you move the roof out. I mean, it's 320 grand that house cost, and it's all off the shelf stuff. I mean, that is a B&Q, glass house. So what do? You cover it. The sun comes, heats it up, you cover it, you keep the heat in, and it's works like a little thermal blanket. So it's actually super sensible, but really good fun at the same time. And I think if you can manage those two combinations, then you're onto a winner.
Right, and it sounds like for you, that sense of joy, there's different factors. You said earlier, you bring your life experience into your work, and it sounds like you had a lot of joy growing up from this kind of communal living, and maybe joy is easy for you to come by because you had near-death experience. I mean, maybe do you think that contributes, that you can access that maybe more easily than most?
Yeah, it's funny. I was having a conversation with Mark earlier, actually, and he was very sweetly said, "You're very brave, Sadie," which inverted commas, completely nuts. And I think that I often say, for those of you who don't know, I'm a cancer survivor, and I always say, if I live, if I survive, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it does absolutely make you kind of reassess kind of what you want to do with your life, and if you are if something like that happens to you when you're fairly young, I think it also because you think you're going to be invincible and you're going to live forever, and suddenly like, shit, I might not. It's really annoying, but it definitely kind of injects you with a sense of like life is for living. I mean, it seriously is for living, and you need to remind yourself of that. And I think that those of us who get stuck and just, kind of looking down the whole time, like treading, getting stuff done, you really do need to kind of take a breath and look up. And I think architects in particular, when we get stuck into something, we can become really kind of narrowly focused. And that's when outcomes become, I think, you can see a really uptight building. I mean, I'm sure, have you been in uptight buildings? Oh my God, it's just like, like who on earth was like, yawn.
97% of buildings maybe?
What's that?
97% of buildings around us. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, look at us all in black, give yourself a favor. So stop taking yourself so seriously. So I think that there is real opportunity to bring a bit of color and a bit of your own energy and passion into buildings. And I think if we take more time to look around, to include those diverse voices, to cross borders, to open your mind to what is an incredible, kind of ability now to see cultures around the world, to integrate yourself in ways that you never could, even when I was a student. I think we have to do that.
Right. Well, it's really inspiring, I think. And another piece of your work also kind of related back to your childhood, which I just think is fascinating. I could just talk to you about that. I would love. But anyway, is what you were saying about sort of the idea of breaking rules, that you don't have to do it the way everybody. And I visited one of your projects when I was working on a book a while ago in London, the Kingsdale School, which I was just blown away by. I thought it was wonderful. But everywhere you look there, you're breaking what were kind of rules, and everybody saw from the presentation, like nobody had done the ETFE roof before. You're breaking that rule, like, or you're doing, cross timber, or you're doing adaptive reuse of a school that's failing, and that wasn't done before. And I think it's that sort of ability to break the rules, but you're not brash. You're not saying, screw off, but when it's the smart time to do it. And that's something I think it's a really good lesson. I think I've taught a little bit, and it's something like, I think even kind of taking that initiative and breaking the rules in school, it seems like it's hard for students to do that, and architecture students do that. So how do you get people to do that when they're taught to just, this is the assignment, this is what you do? It's like, well, yeah, but maybe don't do that. How do you balance that?
That is a really good question. I think that there's a difference, I think, between being respectful and a rule breaker. I think you can be a rule breaker and still be respectful. And that's the way in which I think you gain respect, and you're able to, not get zero in your... which is everyone's really worried about. Non-compliant, they call it in the UK. So when you apply to do a project, and you have to write in and say you're non-compliant on a competition that you've worked for years, like 6 months at vast expense, and you're like, oh my God, because always the non-compliant ones win without bloody fail. I tell you that for free. And you're like, that is so unfair. We stuck to the brief. We did absolutely everything, and that person, practice did something completely different. They bloody well won, that's the lesson. But I think it is quite difficult. I think I do think nowadays, with the pressure that students have, the fees that it's just like everything is piled on top of you, and you must get your first, or you have to be super top and really good at everything, and I think that it's also about how the world reacts to that. So, for example, if anyone, I rarely give a job to somebody who's got a first-class degree, mainly because I didn't get one. Because, that's not entirely true. So let's just say that everybody who applies to the practice, I assume, is a good architect. And then what I found, I don't do it anymore, but at the time when I did employ people, I would just look at their what their interests were. And I remember employing this French gal because she said she was a motorbike mechanic and a really good cook. And I'm like, wow, you sound so cool. And of course she was. And so I think maybe it's not about rule breaking. Maybe it's just about being yourself. And maybe it's having the confidence to bring that to the party, and if something doesn't work with you and you're not feeling the love, if you're having to do something and you're just like, this isn't my vibe, then maybe it's more about having the confidence in yourself to say, I'd like to do something a little bit different, or perhaps perhaps my idea, which might not resonate or be kind of what is expected of me, is good.
Right.
I don't think I answered that very well, but it's quite, it's a hard one. It's really hard.
Well, it's interesting. Like a lot of what you're playing, it's like you're looking at what is integrity and what is beauty, and like these are things that are really, there's no definition to them, but you need to have an idea of what they are if you're gonna, like what you've done with infrastructure and what you've done with housing, which are things that, by the way, I'm like, being in the U.S., I'm very jealous that we don't seem to have anything like that.
Well, we didn't.
Yeah. So tell us, how do we do it here? How do we franchise this?
I tell you what, okay, the truth is, so I find myself on the national, there's a story to get me there, but let's just say I got a phone call that said, could I come to the Treasury and speak to Lord Adonis. I know, could I take a phone call? And I'm like, the first thing is like, absolutely no way. I'm completely rubbish on the telephone. People have, I need to be with people. So I'm like, oh, I happen to be passing the Treasury tomorrow, lie. Why don't I drop in? And so I drop in, and it turns out I'm having an interview for the commission. And, the end of which they say, is there anything you need to tell me? And I'm like, is there anything that might embarrass the government in your past? And I'm like, where do I start? And anyway, fast forward, I got the job, and I find myself on a panel. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Demis Hassabis, who started DeepMind. There's probably 8 people in the world who are as intelligent as he is. So he's on my right. The chief economist to the World Bank is on my left. You name it. I'm sat at a table, and I am so unbelievably, feeling like I'm in the wrong place, and that I have total imposter syndrome, and to the point where when the Chancellor of the Exchequer comes in, I almost put my hand up and say I need to go to the toilet, because I'm so scared about being there. Anyway, what did it teach me? It taught me that actually I'm not ever going to be, my math is never good enough to compare to this chief economist, and my AI skills, and Demis is just off the scale. But what can I do, and what do? I know about design. I know about architecture. I know about these things. They don't. And I tell you what, when I talk about it, they're like, Sadie, you are, and I'm like, I know, I'm cool. And I'm suddenly the only person in the room who asked the stupid question, because I don't care. I'm like, what does GDP mean? And, like that. Tim was like, you're kidding me, Sadie? You don't? And I'm like,
well, what's a floor plan?
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah, exactly. And so suddenly I realized that I'm the only person who has a 3-dimensional way of thinking, and that I'm the only person who's a good connector, because they're all so bloody clever. They're just linear thinkers, they're just.
Yeah, they'll live anywhere probably. They don't care about the way things look.
Yeah. So, and then I'm like, well, what am I going to do about it? So then I say, can I set a group up where I can share it? And it's full of people who know what So I just set stuff up, and they seem to let me do it. I mean, it's really like, don't ask, don't get. And it was real. I think also they're just like, in the end, they're just like, oh God, just get her off my back. Because I'm like, so they just, and I say, can I set this up? Can I do that? Can I do that? And they're like, all right, then, how much is it going to cost? And now I'm like, it's going to cost a lot of money. But
you'd had to to get onto that. Like, was there always a design person on that?
Never, ever in the history.
Wow.
How
did that happen then? How did you get to be?
By mistake, I think. I'd hate to say it, because you should never put yourself down. But I think it was. I don't think they really. Don't think they knew what they were doing when they invited me on. But no, infrastructure. I was chairing the independent design panel for High Speed 2, and the truth is, although I thought I had a very dodgy past, I paid my taxes, and I hadn't embarrassed or done anything in the papers. So there aren't that many, young female women who, because they obviously want a girl at that time, looking for a bit of diversity. And and I was clean.
But what it does is it.
Yeah, I know.
I
know. I know that sounds
clean.
funny to you. I know. I thought it was funny
Everybody
myself.
Shower. But it sets a huge precedent. Like, you are now like it's great that we're talking about this at all, because you are like a pioneer in like getting designers into fields that really need to be in. And on a national level, which in the U.S. is sort of unheard of, as far as I know. I mean, I know the GSA has a design excellence, but nothing in infrastructure. I mean, God, no.
But honestly, if I can do it, I think it is true. And in the UK, lots of people come up and say, I can't believe it. How do you do it? And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure how I've done it if I really think about it. But the reality is, you're right. Now there is a precedent, and I exist, and I have been on that panel, and now they will need to replace me because you only have certain terms in national government, so I will have to leave, and so somebody will have to fill my space, and they've already brought some really interesting people on the panel, which are very different to those, because I do think they understand that there is a value for having somebody with an old I was going to say ulterior motive. I don't have an ulterior motive, but I have a different perspective. I have a different voice, and I have a vision that doesn't align with theirs. I mean, I have a vision which is the same, which is we all want to deliver an inspiring infrastructure that works for everybody and is, a pleasure to use and doesn't cost the earth.
Right.
So.
But it's the idea that everybody thinks design is just window dressing, whereas actually no, design can be integral to all of this, and it can actually be the piece that links everything.
Yeah. Which is the message, and I have to say is getting. I do think is getting through. I mean, we've now just published the design and the next iteration. So project-specific design principles. So when we started, it was just sort of national infrastructure design principles. Now, Network Rail have them. The Highways Agency have them. All the water has them. National Grid, who put all the pylons up, are just starting to put their own design principles together. So it is, people, and the design is designing in, kind of the climate issues and sustainability and value in terms of what value does it bring other than cost. And all of those things are things that we care about now. And I think even, we all do. We're all talking about it. And I think organizations are trying to find ways to embed that going forward.
Yeah, and I just think that's a good lesson for anybody that's starting an architect. It's like design is not, it's the vision in your head is just image, but it's vision. It's
exactly.
It shouldn't even start with visuals.
Yeah.
I see it in certain places, a shift from the role of the architect as the great artist that kind of oversees things to what you were saying. I never used this word before. I love it. To a curator or an orchestrator. And I'm curious about that shift and how you see that shift. Like, is it something that you're seeing as well? And do you think it's like, oh, well, we don't have a choice because we really need to start listening to people? Or, why are we moving into that direction of curator, and why?
I would hope so. So, I think if I look back 10 or 15 years and that kind of star architect, we have fewer of them, whether or not that's because the profession isn't doing so well. But no, I don't think it. I think if I look at my generation, which I would say is a sort of step one down from the Fosters and the Rogers and the Zahas, is kind of like we are a practice that we love collaboration. We just, any opportunity to work with anybody else. We now nurture and mentor young practices. If we go in for a project, we nearly always bring another practice with us, smaller, and we are, I think, have a very strong sense of, I think, collective responsibility, which is to say we have to share our knowledge. We have to share the things, that we are able to do in a way that doesn't mean we are compromising our USP, or whatever it might be. We're still competing with others. We second people now from our if we have a collection of 5 or 6 different practices, all who do similar work, and if we need people, and they have a bit of a sort of, they have spare capacity, we'll take people on for 3 or 4 months, because we don't, we're not hiring and firing anymore. We're trying to work in a way that is respectful of people, and we are quite happy to share that kind of level of intelligence. And I think that that's a very different place than even 10 years ago.
It sounds like it's two ways. You're sharing intelligence, but you're also like with the peer, you're pulling in intelligence
Sure.
in a way that
Brilliant.
the single artist or the single firm could never do. Like, how do you pull 10,000 people? Like, how do you get that knowledge?
I think it's, I think culturally there is a understanding that we have to converse with others that aren't just in our, aren't just the built environment. I mean, of course we speak to engineers, landscape designers, and so forth, but actually having that richness of conversation and diversity, whether it be with an economist or whether it be with a politician, all of those things have taught me so many more things than just being surrounded by kind of everyone who thinks the same or wants to do the same. And that has absolutely inspired me, I think, to say, we have a great practice, we do great stuff, but we're never going to change the world because we're not big enough to do that. But the way in which you can change the world is to just move up a few levels, and you can have a small conversation with a group of people who are writing the briefs or setting policy or setting governmental direction for the next 50 years, and suddenly your influence is huge. And if more of us with that kind of sensibility and empathy were in those positions, then the world would be a better place.
My name is Cowie. I'm a high school senior right now, and I just wanted to ask you why you think joy has become so separate from architecture, because I thought it was kind of like, I was kind of sad that joy is like something that separates you from the rest of the field, because I feel like joy should be more prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. But I think, that sort of level, I mean, it's a really good question, because it says what is important to us and how do we prioritize it. And I think that that's a lot to do with the kind of client briefs and also what people think of as important. And when you set briefs, or you are setting competitions, or when you're employing or you're looking to employ practices, I think it's really important to say, these are the things that we are looking for. And, you can't always say we're looking for joy, but you can look for practices who have good working practices, who are good to their staff, who think about social value, i.e. they're working with communities. There's lots of things that bring that level of kind of empathy and creativity, which ultimately I think brings joy and happiness into your work. So if you're clever about it, I think you can start to try to define what it is that produces more kind of buildings that offer delight. But I think it is also subjective, isn't it? But I think that I think I'll stop there, because I might just waffle otherwise. But it's a good question, and not sure I know the answer.
Thank you, Sadie. That was an amazing presentation. Especially love the Mackey Center. That's so gorgeous. So I can't help but really appreciate your presentation on integrity. There's a really amazing article that I love by Margaret Crawford that asks the question, can architects be socially responsible? And the tricky thing is, now our industry is so reliant on developers that might not have the same integrity and the same values and principles that you embody. How do you navigate that? And especially if there's a lot of pressure to do questionable things that might affect a community in a negative way?
It's such a good question. It's incredibly hard, is the answer. And I think that the only way I've felt that I'm able to manage my own expectation about what I should and shouldn't do is just to completely try and stick to and kind of always bring your design and your conversations back to the things that matter. Now, is it better to is is it better to be involved in things that you don't always ultimately agree with, or stand aside and say, no, I'm not going to work with you because I don't think that you don't align with my values. And I would say that I, up to a point, will always try to be involved and work with people who have different views to me, in the hope that I can persuade them otherwise. And so, I've worked with I have to be politically neutral because I'm a civil servant in many ways, but let's just say I don't know what your political views are, but let's just say you are asked to work with a government for a period of time whose you don't naturally align with. Now, do you say, no, I'm not going to? Or do you say, actually, I'm going to get involved in order that I might be able to kind of shift your policy thinking? So I'm always somebody who will get involved. I mean, in working with people and try to change the way that they think about the world. But I do think that clients do have an incredible responsibility also. But if you talk to developers, I spend a lot of time speaking and working with developers who have a sort of social conscience, who are trying, and it's also hard for them. It's not always, we're all like, oh, we're one step down so we can take the moral high ground. Well, actually, sometimes it is really difficult, and you can, there are tight budgets and difficult way, sort of, it's not always easy to kind of have the kind of outcome that you want. But I think if you start with a good brief, you start with an enlightened client, and if you're lucky enough to only be able to work with them, then whoopee-doo. But, it's not always been the case for us. And what we've always set to is, we've said we will try really hard and show you the alternative. You don't have to build like this. You can build in this material. And we've lost so much money. At one point in our early career, we did a project running at our own expense. We detailed and designed it all in timber. Just to prove it's mad. I don't know. No wonder we're so commercially inept. But we basically designed the whole project, as we wanted it to be built, even though the client's like, no way, no way, no way. But we did prove that actually it was as cheap and much better to have designed, to build it in the way that we put forward. So a lot of the time it's just, it is just about often making that argument and doing so in a way that is not aggressive, but is kind of participatory.
You mentioned that you won a competition not based on a designed building, but a methodology that you proposed. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that methodology.
Yeah, I mean, it was for Kingsdale, and at the time, it wasn't, the kind of consultation process wasn't as mature as it is now. And so we said, okay, how are we going to go and talk to these kids who clearly, aren't really interested in speaking to people like us? Good example, we went out and bought loads of, you won't even know what they are. They're disposable cameras. You used to be able to buy disposable cameras. And we just, I don't know, I literally sort of spent 100 quid out of my savings account and bought like hundreds of disposable cameras from Boots. And then we set up a fake TV studio in the school, and we handed out all these cameras, and everyone's like, oh, you'll never get them back, they'll just nick them. And we said, go and photograph like all the bits you don't like and some of the bits you do like about your school. And we got I think we probably lost, out of 100 cameras, we probably got 95 back. And it's about showing that you trust, and, the kind of kids who at the time where no one trusted them, they were seen as sort of delinquents. And then we set this fake news studio up, and we filmed everyone coming in, and we were like, okay, so, you know. And they loved it. And then we had the dinner lady come up, and she's like, "Oh, I want to be on TV," and it wasn't really on TV, but everyone kind of. So, I suppose the methodology was about how do you communicate and how do you encourage a set of people who aren't used to having those kinds of discussions to help you write a brief, because we said you can't just go in there. Like, sure, we'd love to come and knock it down and start again, but that is you're never gonna have a community who have a kind of sense of a sense of stewardship over this over this school. You're never gonna build a sense of pride and a sense of achievement in something if you just knock it down and start again. So I suppose we came not with a building, but with a kind of program for consultation and co-design, and we won. I mean, it was nuts. I mean, it's like that. That's exactly. We were those people who didn't stick to the rules. We were the ones who. Yeah, God, I didn't ever think about that. I've always been really jealous of everyone else. In that case, we were the ones who did exactly the opposite of what we were supposed to do. It did. It was brilliant. It was like, it was one of our earliest and most, it's a really successful project for us. I'm very keen on trying to formulate opportunities for diverse conversations. And as you know, because you very kindly supported me in doing so, I run some events for women and who come from different diverse backgrounds, who are able to support each other in ways that you wouldn't necessarily be able to. And I think that I have a huge amount of energy and passion for encouraging those cross conversations, which I think is why Crossing Borders is such a great season of such a great program. I don't know. I mean, I'm ultimately going to sail around the world in a couple of years' time. So that's my next top tip. But that's only going to take a year or two. So thereafter, I'm not entirely sure. But watch this space. I don't know. I'm up for ideas. If anyone's got any kind of really great things they want to do, then count me in. I'm really up for something.